Hi, my name is Devin. I'm a teacher. I teach English language. I have been teaching English language for 10 years now. I started teaching 15 years ago. I started teaching English literature in high school. Um, in university, I studied English literature, and for my master's, I did a master's in teaching English literature for high school. So I have my master's in education and teaching. But I think 10 years ago, I decided to move to Spain, and I lived in Spain, in Barcelona, for 7 years, and I taught English language. I changed. So for 10 years, I've been teaching English language, and I came back, and now I was teaching at a university for a few years, English language the same. The interesting thing that I can share with you is that I have a second language. I speak Spanish. And a lot of my students, come and have problems and questions for me. And so what I wanted to do is create this video, number one, to introduce myself to potential new students. I am starting to do internet group classes. And so this is a way to introduce myself to potential clients, to potential students. Because, I don't know, I decided it was time for me to do my own method, to do my own way. And I would prefer to, do it directly with the student. And the internet, it really is very useful. It's scary for me. It's difficult for me to think of having a class with just a video. But I do think it's the future. And it will get better. So let me go back, and I said that a lot of students have questions and problems. Yes, learning second language is a difficult thing. It takes a lot of time, energy, and money, to do it well. And I teach a lot of adult students now, and almost all of my adult students, they really want to find the direct way. And that is great. That's what the teacher wants too. The teacher wants a direct way. Because the students need to be efficient. And the teacher wants to be efficient too. Because we have a lot of responsibilities. We have work, we have family, we have friends, we have all these other interests in our lives. And when we need to learn English or a second language, when we need to learn English, it competes with all these other responsibilities and parts of our lives. So it's very important, I think, to a lot of my students. They're motivated to learn English, but in reality, English is not the first priority. I don't think for any of my students it has ever been the first priority. That would be kind of strange. So what happens is, if you need to do something like learn a second language, which is a long and difficult process, just quite naturally, it's difficult. It takes a lot of time and energy, and, well, money too. And so we need to be efficient. And before we kind of go on this process, and we're in this process, the most efficient way is to understand the basics of what the process is, the problems that we will face, that we will see, so we can anticipate these problems. We also need to know, just general information. How is it to learn a second language? So what I like to do with my students is, tell them, basically my philosophy, or the way I see learning a language, learning a second language, and learning English. I think that's very effective, and it saves time, and it saves energy, and it saves money. So I think everyone likes that. Now, so I have two metaphors for you today. The first one is the mountain. Okay, so the metaphor is learning English or a second language. Learning English is like climbing a mountain. Now, for me, in my Spanish, right, I had to struggle a lot. I was on the mountain too, in a Spanish speakers. And here I am, the learner, and I was climbing the mountain. Okay. The problem is that I didn't go the direct way. I kind of went the indirect way, right? So there's two ways to go the indirect way. The one that I did is I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have class. A long time ago in school, I studied Spanish, but I wanted to do it by myself, and I did. I learned eventually, but for a few years I was doing this, and really my Spanish was like survival Spanish, until like I met certain people in my life, important people in my life, who were like guides, not teachers, but just friends and people close to me, that really put a lot of time and effort into helping me with my Spanish and communicating with me and correcting me. So when I found these people that helped me, these guides, then it was a straighter process. It was a more direct way. So that's important if you are in a different country, in an English-speaking country. It is, especially if we're just starting. This is a difficult thing. We are climbing a mountain. It's not a good idea to climb a mountain alone, especially if you are not a professional mountain. You need a Sherpa. So when you find a good guide, then you can go more direct, because this is their profession. This is what they do. And that's necessary. That's one of the essentials of learning. You need a guide or a teacher. The other way you can go indirect is actually when you go and find a guide, when you find a class, when you find a language school, and there's several different methods to teach a language, but the big one, the traditional one, is basically grammar intensive, grammar based. And what happens is if you're reading a book and studying a lot of grammar, then the focus, the concentration is on learning that information and trying to memorize. And then on a test or on an exam, your information. Right? But that's not communication. And that's not putting practicing communication as the #1 priority. That's actually #2, right? That's the second priority. If your first priority is to understand a lot of grammar and remember the information. But in a future video, I will talk more about that, because that's super important to understand, super important. But not in this video. All right, so we have more or less two ways. We go to class, but the method is not good. It's too much grammar. It's not a lot of communication. Or we do it by ourselves, and what happens is because it's a difficult process, we have tendencies, and some of these tendencies are not good. So first off, when you climb a mountain, you go up, right? And you really have to climb. Gravity is against you, right? So it's not easy. The same with learning and speaking in a second language. You have to think about everything, and you sit there, and it's almost like you're not an adult anymore. You don't have that ability to express, and this is a real kind of problem. This is difficult. This is if you, for example, in your hometown or something where you speak your first language, you go to the bank, you go to the supermarket, you have a conversation with someone in the street. Compare that to when you do it in somewhere else with your second language. Everything is like, we go uphill. Everything is climbing. Everything is concentration. Everything is sort of a struggle. And that's what I mean by climbing a mountain. Everything is a struggle. And if we start here, that's actually, that's pretty difficult. We're in the beginning stage. Because as students, we do want to run, we want to find the direct way, we want to finish the process. But that finishing the process is a bad tendency, that desire, that motivation to kind of stop the process and have your second language, have English. That's not possible. That's like running up a mountain. You can't do it. You can't go fast with this. You have to kind of step by step climb up the mountain with attention and curiosity and imagination, and try to be positive about it. Now, that's kind of difficult. I know for a fact that's really difficult to be positive. There's a lot of like negative emotions in this, but we can't really avoid those emotions. If we have those emotions, we have to understand them. We have to go, okay, this does not feel good. I feel stupid, or I am frustrated, or I am confused, or that person thinks because I can't talk, I can't express myself, they think I'm stupid, or whatever, kind of emotions that you have. There's also positive ones, but really what I want to do is focus on the negative ones, the negative emotions, for a good reason. Because first, what is the top of the mountain, right? What is our objective? This is pretty important, right? You need to think about this. Like, what is your objective for your second language, for English? For example, in Spanish, the top of the mountain for me, right here, is being conversational, being able to communicate, on everyday situations, going to the bank, talking with friends, going to the supermarket, being able to live in Spanish and not feel tense and nervous and that I am stupid all the time. Maybe my Spanish is not perfect because I'm not fluent, but it's like he perdido mi vergüenza. Like I lost my shame in conversing and speaking in Spanish, and I make a lot of mistakes. But really, I kind of just don't care. And for me, that's a completely different feeling than when I was here, struggling. Being up here, you understand that, wow, there's so much to learn. It's a big mountain, but it's okay because it's not, the gravity is not on you so much. For me, the top of the mountain is to be conversational, to be comfortable. And I think for a lot of students, that's all they want. That's the natural thing for me. I don't need perfect Spanish, and I don't think you want perfect English. Okay, so if we don't understand our objective, our ultimate objective, then we have this sort of belief in, oh, it needs to be perfect, and I'm not perfect, and it causes a lot of problems. So please think about your objective. Like, what do you really want? Now, I will talk about more in detail these sorts of things, like, okay, how to, what motivation is good. Like in the future videos, I will talk a lot in detail about this. This is basically the introduction. So right now, let's continue with here. Now, the climber, the student, the learner has a backpack, right? And so, you go up a mountain, you carry your things. What do you carry? What do you have in your backpack? That's important. Today, let's talk about things like this. So we all have positive emotions and negative emotions. And by emotions, we can also say mental habits, habits of mind. I'm not talking about thinking and calculating. I'm thinking about these feelings and these emotions that come up and the habit that we have to how we react and respond to situations, how we feel about ourselves. This is very important because negative emotions, kind of with like gravity, especially, they'll push us down. They're heavy. They weigh on us. And really, they're extra weight. They're not necessary. It's okay to have them. That's natural. But we need to understand them because we need to take them off. Okay. So with emotions, I have another metaphor for you.